Cleaning lady. Tries to buy something for her daughter at luxury store, then a millionaire steps in. What happened next shocked everyone. Welcome back and enjoy the story. Brenda scrubbed the floor vigorously, the harsh scent of cleaning. Chemicals irritating her cracked hands. Her knees ached from hours of kneeling on the hard tile. Since dawn, she hadn't stopped moving, carrying heavy buckets, scrubbing bathrooms, enduring complaints from customers about the strong smell of bleach. But none of that mattered now. Just a few more hours and she could finally visit the jewelry store. For the past 6 months she had saved every penny, skipped lunches, walked miles to avoid bus fare. Sometimes her daughter, Dora, would ask why Brenda looked so exhausted, but she would simply smile and say, "You'll understand soon enough, my love." The prestigious Boston hotel where she worked catered to wealthy business people who rarely acknowledged her presence. Brenda had grown accustomed to being invisible, a shadow that moved silently through the corridors, erasing evidence of other people's messes. Today, that invisibility felt particularly heavy as she watched guests in designer clothes walk across the floor she had just cleaned, leaving fresh footprints in their wake. "Ms. Willis wants the executive suite redone," her supervisor barked as she passed. "The toiletries aren't arranged to her liking." Brenda nodded silently, swallowing her frustration. Ms. Willis, a regular guest, was notorious among the cleaning staff for her impossible standards and condescending attitude. Just last week she had complained that Brenda's cleaning cart was an eyesore and shouldn't be visible in the hallway even while Brenda was actively working. "And make it quick," the supervisor added. "She's returning from her spa appointment in 30 minutes. With weary arms, Brenda loaded fresh towels onto her cart and headed toward the elevator. As she waited, she caught her reflection in the polished metal doors. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and premature lines creased her forehead. At 42, she looked a decade older. But behind the exhaustion in her eyes burned a quiet determination. Today was special. Today, all the sacrifices would be worth it. "Hold the elevator," a man's voice called. Brenda quickly pressed the door open button, and a well-dressed businessman hurried inside. He barely glanced at her, immediately focusing on his smartphone. When they reached the executive floor, he stepped out without a word of thanks. Brenda maneuvered her cart down the hallway to suite 1214. Inside, she meticulously rearranged the toiletries according to Miss Willis's exacting preferences. As she worked, her thoughts drifted to the small velvet box that would soon be hers. For Dora's 16th birthday, she wanted to give her something special, something that would show her daughter that dreams could come true, even for people like them. The pendant had caught Brenda's eye months ago, a delicate silver star with a tiny diamond at its center. Not extravagant by wealthy standards, but for Brenda, it represented countless hours of extra shifts and sacrificed necessities. It represented hope. When her shift finally ended, Brenda changed out of her uniform in the staff locker room. She carefully combed her hair and applied a touch of lipstick, small efforts to prepare herself for entry into a world that wasn't designed for people who scrubbed floors for a living. With her savings securely tucked into her purse, she left the hotel and walked the 6 blocks to Garrison's fine jewelry on Newbury Street. Each step brought her closer to fulfilling the promise she had made to herself. The autumn air carried a slight chill, but Brenda barely noticed. Her mind focused solely on the moment that lay ahead. As she approached the store, the elegant window displays gleamed under soft lighting, showcasing diamonds that cost more than her annual salary. Brenda paused, momentarily overwhelmed by doubt. Would they even let someone like her through the door? But then she thought of Dora's face when she would open the gift, and her resolve strengthened. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into a world of luxury that felt as foreign to her as another planet. The jewelry store's interior was bathed in warm golden light that reflected off glass cases, filled with treasures Brenda had only ever seen in magazines. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and plush cream carpeting cushioned her steps. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with polished wood and leather. Immediately, Brenda felt the weight of her worn coat and scuffed shoes. She clutched her purse tighter, suddenly conscious of how out of place she must appear. A few well-dressed customers browsed the displays, their casual demeanor suggesting comfort in surroundings that made Brenda's heart race with anxiety. She approached a glass case containing smaller pieces, scanning for the star pendant she had admired through the window for months. There it was, delicate and perfect, catching the light just as she remembered. "Can I help you?" The voice was cool and crisp. Brenda looked up to see a saleswoman with immaculate blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. The woman, her name tag, read Elena, wore a black designer suit that emphasized her slender figure, and her makeup was flawlessly applied. Her expression, however, contained none of the warmth that the store's lighting suggested. "Yes," Brenda said, attempting to keep her voice steady. "I'm interested in that pendant, the silver star with the small diamond." Eleanor's gaze traveled slowly from Brenda's face down to her worn handbag and back again. A slight smile curved her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That piece?" she asked, pointing to a different, less expensive item. "No," Brenda corrected politely. "The star, the one with the diamond in the center." "I see." Eleanor's voice took on a tone one might use when speaking to a child. "That's from our celestial collection. The diamond is VS Clarity, and the setting is platinum, not silver." Brenda felt her cheeks warm. "Could I see it, please?" Eleanor hesitated, her perfectly manicured hand hovering above the case. "These pieces start at a certain price point. Perhaps I could show you something more accessible." The humiliation began to crawl up Brenda's spine, but she stood her ground. "I've been saving for this specific pendant. I'd like to see it, please." With visible reluctance, Eleanor unlocked the case and removed the pendant, holding it just beyond Brenda's reach. "It's $2,200, she said bluntly, watching Brenda's face for a reaction. "Plus tax." Brenda's heart sank. The price had increased by $400 since she last inquired months ago. After half a year of saving, she was still short. "Oh," she said quietly, "it was $1,800 the last time I checked." Elena's expression shifted to one of barely concealed amusement. "Our celestial collection has become quite popular. Supply and demand, you understand." From across the room, another customer, a woman dripping in diamonds, glanced over with undisguised curiosity. Brenda could feel judgment radiating from multiple directions now. "Perhaps," Elena continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, "you might try the costume jewelry store down the street. They have some very convincing replicas that might better suit your budget." The words stung like a slap. Brenda felt her carefully constructed dignity beginning to crumble. 6 months of sacrifice, of telling Dora they couldn't afford new school supplies or proper winter boots, all for nothing. "I understand," Brenda managed to say, though her throat felt tight. "Thank you for your time." She turned to leave, blinking rapidly to hold back tears that threatened to fall. Behind her, she heard Eleanor speaking in a hushed tone to another employee, followed by a muffled laugh. With her hand on the door, Brenda paused as a deep voice called out from the back of the store. "Excuse me, ma'am. Please wait a moment." If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. Brenda turned slowly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. The man who had called out to her was walking briskly across the showroom floor. He appeared to be in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and authority. His expression was difficult to read, not unkind, but intensely focused. "David Marshall," he said, extending his hand. "I'm the owner of Garrison's." Brenda hesitated before taking his offered hand. His grip was firm but not overwhelming, and he looked directly into her eyes, something many of her employers avoided doing. "Brenda Wilson," she replied, her voice still unsteady. "Ms. Wilson, I couldn't help overhearing part of your conversation." His gaze shifted briefly to Elena, who suddenly became very interested in rearranging a display. "Would you mind speaking with me for a moment, in my office?" Confusion and wariness battled within her. Was this another form of humiliation? Would she be accused of something? She thought of slipping away, returning to the familiar invisibility. of her life, but something in David Marshall's steady gaze made her reconsider. "All right," she agreed cautiously. He led her through a door marked "Private" into a hallway lined with framed photographs, old black-and-white images of the store throughout different decades, newspaper clippings and portraits of who she assumed were previous owners. At the end of the hall, he opened a door to a surprisingly modest office. Unlike the showroom's ostentatious display of wealth, this room was practical and lived in. Papers were stacked neatly on a wooden desk, and the leather chair showed signs of wear. "Please have a seat," David said, gesturing to a comfortable chair opposite his desk. As Brenda sat, she noticed a photo on his desk, a younger David with a woman and teenage girl, all smiling broadly against a backdrop of mountains. "Ms. Wilson, first I'd like to apologize for your experience today," he began, settling into his chair. "That's not how we do business at Garrison's, or at least it's not how we should do business." Brenda clutched her purse in her lap, unsure how to respond. "Tell me about this pendant," he said, his tone conversational. "You mentioned you've been saving for it." The unexpected gentleness in his question loosened something in Brenda's chest. "It's for my daughter, Dora," she found herself explaining. "She's turning 16 next week. We don't have much, but I wanted to give her something special, something that would last." She paused, embarrassed by her own sentiment. "It sounds foolish when I say it aloud." "Not foolish at all," David replied, leaning forward slightly. "May I ask what drew you to that particular piece?" Brenda hadn't expected the question, and she took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Dora loves astronomy. Even when we couldn't afford much, we'd go to the library and she'd check out every book on stars and planets. The pendant, it reminded me of how she lights up when she talks about the universe, about possibilities." A small smile formed on David's face. "You've been saving for 6 months?" "Yes," Brenda admitted. "I put aside what I could. I was sure I had enough, but the price increased." David nodded thoughtfully. "Inflation has affected our costs, unfortunately." He studied her for a moment. "Ms. Wilson, would you mind telling me what you do for a living?" The question brought her back to reality, to the stark difference between them. "I'm a cleaning lady," she said quietly but with dignity. "Currently at the Beacon Hill Grand Hotel, but I also take evening shifts at office buildings downtown." Something shifted in David's expression. Not pity exactly, but a kind of recognition. "2 jobs?" he asked. "3, on weekends," Brenda corrected. "I help an elderly woman in my neighborhood with housekeeping." David was silent for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small ledger book, an unexpected analog item in a digital age. "My father started this business in 1952, he said, opening the book to reveal handwritten entries. "He came to this country with almost nothing. His first job was cleaning offices at night, while he learned the jewelry trade during the day." He turned the book toward Brenda, showing her the faded handwriting. "These are records of customers who purchased on installment plans, people who, like you, saved for something special." Brenda looked at the careful notations, dates spanning back decades, with small amounts paid weekly or monthly until items were paid in full. "We don't officially offer installment plans anymore," David continued. "The corporate market demands instant transactions, credit cards, financing through banks." He closed the book. "But my father would have respected your commitment, Ms. Wilson, and so do I." He stood and walked to the door. "Let's go back to the showroom. I think we can find a solution for your daughter's birthday gift." When they returned to the showroom, the atmosphere had noticeably shifted. Eleanor was assisting another customer with excessive enthusiasm, while other staff members glanced curiously at Brenda and David. Brenda felt her discomfort returning under their scrutiny, but David's confident stride beside her provided an unexpected shield. "Marcus," David called to a young man arranging watches in a display case, "could you please bring out the star pendant from the Celestial collection?" "Of course, Mr. Marshall," Marcus replied, promptly retrieving the piece that had been so reluctantly shown to Brenda earlier. David led Brenda to a quiet corner, with a small private counter. The pendant was placed on a velvet pad between them, capturing the light even more beautifully than she remembered. Up close, the craftsmanship, was evident in every detail. The precision of the star's points, the perfect setting of the small but brilliant diamond. "It's lovely," Brenda said softly. "It is," David agreed. "One of our more understated pieces, but sometimes the simplest designs carry the most meaning." He paused, considering the pendant. "Ms. Wilson, how much were you able to save for this?" Brenda hesitated, then opened her purse. From a side pocket, she carefully extracted an envelope containing $20 bills and smaller denominations, meticulously counted and recounted over months. She had $1,783.42, every cent she could spare without leaving herself completely destitute. "I have $1,783, she said, rounding down slightly, too proud to mention the coins. David looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "Our cost on this piece is $1,750. I'd be happy to let you have it for $1,700. Brenda stared at him, certain she had misheard, but it's priced at $2,200. "Retail markup," David explained with a dismissive wave. "Necessary for business, but flexible when the situation calls for it." She eyed him suspiciously. "Why would you do this?" David considered her question seriously. "Partly because I don't appreciate how you were treated here today. Partly because your commitment to your daughter reminds me of my parents' sacrifices for me." He smiled slightly. "And partly because good business isn't always about maximizing profit on every transaction." His words seemed sincere, but Brenda had encountered enough false kindness in her life to remain wary. "I don't want charity," she said firmly. "This isn't charity," David replied, his tone equally firm. "It's respect for a customer who values our craftsmanship enough to save for months, the kind of customer my father would have appreciated." They regarded each other for a long moment, a silent understanding passing between them. "All right," Brenda finally agreed. "Thank you." As Marcus processed the transaction, Brenda counted out the bills carefully. She felt both vulnerable and empowered. Vulnerable because the money represented countless hours of hard work. Empowered because she was completing the purchase that had been her goal for so long. When the pendant was finally placed in a velvet box and wrapped in the store's signature gold paper, Brenda felt an emotion she hadn't experienced in years: accomplishment. Despite Elena's judgment, despite the system that constantly reminded people like her of their place, she had persevered. David handed her the small package and a receipt. "I hope your daughter loves it." "She will," Brenda said, certainty in her voice for the first time since entering the store. As she turned to leave, David spoke again. "Ms. Wilson, we're actually looking for someone part-time to help with inventory management and some administrative work. The hours would be flexible and the pay is better than cleaning. Would you be interested?" The offer stunned her. "But I don't have experience in retail or jewelry." "You have experience in hard work and dedication," David countered. "The rest can be learned. Think about it and give me a call if you're interested." He handed her his business card. Brenda nodded, unable to find appropriate words. With the package securely in her purse and David's card in her hand, she left Garrison's fine jewelry, her step lighter than when she'd entered. Outside, the autumn air felt crisp against her face. She checked her watch, just enough time to catch the bus home before Dora returned from her after-school science program. As she waited at the bus stop, Brenda couldn't help but wonder if David's job offer was genuine or merely a kindness he would later retract. Life had taught her to be skeptical of unexpected fortune. But then again, perhaps sometimes stars actually did align, both in the heavens and on earth. What if the humiliation she suffered today wasn't just another painful episode, but the beginning of an unexpected journey? Brenda closed her eyes, allowing herself, just for a moment, to imagine the possibilities that lay ahead. The apartment building where Brenda and Dora lived was in a transitional neighborhood, not dangerous but certainly not prosperous. Concrete steps led to a security door with a perpetually broken intercom, and the hallways smelled of cooking, oil and industrial cleaner. Their unit was on the third floor, a one-bedroom apartment that Brenda had transformed into a home through sheer force of will and creativity. When Brenda entered, the apartment was empty, just as she had expected. She placed her purse and the precious gift on the small kitchen table, then quickly changed out of her good clothes, the ones she reserved for parent-teacher meetings and other occasions when she needed to appear less worn down by life. There was just enough time to prepare a simple dinner before Dora would arrive. As she chopped vegetables for a stir-fry, Brenda's mind kept returning to David Marshall's unexpected offer. Part-time work at a jewelry store would certainly pay better than cleaning, and the hours would be more predictable. But could she really fit into that world? Would customers look at her the same way Elena had? The sound of a key in the lock interrupted her thoughts. Dora burst in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark hair escaping from a messy ponytail. At 15, nearly 16, she was caught between childhood and adulthood, sometimes displaying remarkable maturity, other times revealing the vulnerability that made Brenda's heart ache with protectiveness. "Mum, you won't believe what happened in physics today." Dora's eyes were bright with excitement as she dropped her backpack by the door, a habit Brenda had tried unsuccessfully to correct for years. "What happened, sweetie?" Brenda asked, turning from the stove to give her daughter her full attention. Mr. Peterson brought in these amazing holograms of different star systems, and he explained how the light refraction works and... She stopped mid-sentence, noticing something in her mother's expression. "What? Did something happen? You look different." Brenda was continually amazed by her daughter's perceptiveness. "Different how?" Dora tilted her head, studying her mother's face. "I don't know. Nervous, but excited nervous, not bad nervous." "I'm fine," Brenda assured her, turning back to the stir-fry. "Tell me more about the holograms." As Dora launched back into her story, Brenda marveled at her daughter's passion for learning. Despite their financial limitations, despite the disadvantages that came with their socio-economic status, Dora's intelligence and curiosity had never dimmed. Her science teachers recognized her potential, and she had recently been encouraged to apply for a competitive summer internship at the Boston Museum of Science. The application required a written essay, 3 references, and the part that had been causing Brenda anxiety, a $200 application fee that they simply couldn't afford. Brenda hadn't told Dora yet, but she had planned to use some of the pendant, money for the fee which would have left the gift out of reach. Now with David's unexpected discount, perhaps both might be possible. Mr. Peterson said I should definitely include my work on the spectroscopy project in my internship application, Dora was saying as she set the table. "He said it shows initiative." "That's wonderful," Brenda replied, serving the stir-fry onto 2 plates. "Speaking of the internship, I've been thinking about the application fee." Dora's expression immediately became guarded. "Mom, I told you I'm going to see if I can get it waived. Other students have." "I know, but if that doesn't work out, I want you to apply anyway. We'll figure out the fee." Dora studied her mother's face. "Did you take on another job? You're already working too much." "No extra job," Brenda said, choosing her words carefully. "Just a little unexpected good fortune today." "What kind of good fortune?" Dora's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Brenda hesitated. She didn't want to ruin the birthday surprise, but she also didn't want to lie. "Let's just say I met someone who reminded me that kindness still exists in unexpected places." Before Dora could press further, a sharp knock on the door interrupted their conversation. The knocking was distinctive. 3 quick raps followed by 2 slower ones, identifying their visitor as Mrs. Garza from the apartment below. Dora opened the door to reveal their elderly neighbor, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her posture still remarkably straight despite her 82 years. "Evening, Wilson ladies," Mrs. Garza greeted them with a warm smile. "Sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I wanted to drop off these tamales before they got cold." She held out a covered plate that released a mouth-watering aroma. "Mrs. Garza, you're an angel," Brenda said, taking the plate gratefully. "But you didn't have to do this. Nonsense, I made too many as usual. Besides, it's my way of thanking you for helping me with my grocery shopping last week." She turned to Dora. "And how's my favorite young scientist today?" As Dora eagerly updated Mrs. Garza on her school projects, Brenda reflected on the small community they had built in this unremarkable building. Mrs. Garza, who taught piano lessons to neighborhood children. The Diaz family across the hall, who watched Dora after school when Brenda worked late. Mr. Feldman on the first floor, who fixed appliances for residents at no charge, saying it gave purpose to his retirement. Their lives might be humbler than those of the customers at Garrison's, but there was a richness here that couldn't be measured in dollars. After Mrs. Garza left and they had enjoyed the unexpected addition to their dinner, Dora spread her homework across the table. Brenda used this opportunity to secretly hide the pendant in her bedroom, tucking it safely in the back of her closet until Dora's birthday. As she returned to the kitchen to clean up, Brenda found herself thinking about David Marshall again. His unexpected kindness had created a tiny crack in the wall she had built between herself and the possibility of change. For years, she had accepted her circumstances, focusing solely on providing stability for Dora. The thought of something different, something better, was both exhilarating and terrifying. She removed his business card from her purse and studied it. Simple, elegant embossing on heavy cream stock. David Marshall, proprietor, Garrison's Fine Jewelry. "What's that?" Dora asked, looking up from her physics textbook. Brenda quickly returned the card to her purse. "Nothing important," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't true. The next morning dawned grey and drizzly, matching Brenda's uncertainty. She had tossed and turned most of the night, David Marshall's job offer circling in her mind. By the time her alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., she had made a decision. She would call him, but not until after Dora's birthday. One life-changing event at a time. Her pre-dawn routine played out as it always did. A quick shower in the lukewarm water that was the best their building's aging pipes could offer, a cup of instant coffee and a silent check on Dora, who slept peacefully, textbooks still scattered around her bed. Brenda gently removed a physics book from under Dora's arm and placed it on the nightstand, then tucked the blanket more securely around her daughter's shoulders. Outside, the streets were quiet as Brenda walked to the bus stop. The solitude of early morning had always provided her with a sense of peace, as if for a brief time she owned the city and its silence. The bus arrived with a hydraulic sigh, and she climbed aboard, nodding to the driver who had become familiar after years of the same route. At the Beacon Hill Grand Hotel, Brenda slipped in through the service entrance, where the contrast between her world and that of the hotel's guests was most apparent. Staff members moved with purposeful efficiency, preparing the luxury experience that wealthy visitors expected without ever considering the individual lives of those who created it. "Wilson, you're on the executive floors again today," her supervisor announced as Brenda collected her cleaning cart. "And Miss Willis checked in last night. She's already called down complaining about the water pressure." Brenda nodded, keeping her expression neutral despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. Another day of invisibility, of being treated as a function rather than a person. Yet today something felt different. The weight of the previous day's experiences, the humiliation at the jewelry store, David's unexpected kindness, the pendant safely hidden at home, had shifted something within her. As she rode the service elevator to the executive floor, Brenda found herself studying her reflection in the polished metal doors. She saw what others saw, a middle-aged woman in a standardized uniform, her hair pulled back severely, no makeup, hands reddened from years of harsh chemicals. But behind that reflection was a woman who had raised a brilliant daughter alone, who had never missed a rent payment despite the financial struggle, who had saved for 6 months to give her child something beautiful. The elevator doors opened, and Brenda pushed her cart down the plush hallway. As she approached Ms. Willis's suite, she braced herself for the inevitable criticism. She knocked lightly. "Housekeeping." "It's about time," came the sharp reply, from within. "Enter." Brenda used her master key and pushed the door open. The suite was immaculate. Ms. Willis had only checked in the previous night. Yet the woman stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, clearly prepared for confrontation. "The shower head is unacceptable," Ms. Willis began without preamble. "The pressure is inconsistent, and the water temperature fluctuates. I had to rinse my hair twice to get all the shampoo out." "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am," Brenda responded, using the script she had been taught. "I'll report the issue to maintenance immediately." "See that you do." Ms. Willis waved dismissively, then added, "And while you're cleaning, please, try to be quiet. I have important calls to make." As Brenda began her work, moving methodically through the suite, she couldn't help but notice the items scattered across the dresser, an open jewelry case displaying several diamond pieces, designer, perfume bottles, a wallet that probably cost more than Brenda's monthly rent. Among these luxury items was a framed photograph of a teenage girl in a riding helmet, posed with an expensive-looking horse. "My daughter," Miss Willis said suddenly, noticing Brenda's glance at the photo. "She's competing in the regional championships next month." The unexpected personal comment caught Brenda off guard. "She looks very talented," she replied carefully. Miss Willis's expression softened fractionally. "She is. 17 years old and already being scouted by Olympic trainers. You must be very proud." Brenda thought of Dora, equally talented in her own way, but without the advantages this girl clearly enjoyed. "Of course," Ms. Willis agreed, but something in her tone shifted. "Though the sacrifices have been considerable, I rarely see her these days. Boarding school, summer training camps, competitions." She picked up the photo, studying it. "Sometimes I wonder if she's happier in the stable with her horses than at home with me." The vulnerability in the woman's voice was so unexpected that Brenda momentarily forgot their respective positions. "Children need to follow their passions," she said. "But they also need to know we're there for them, even when we can't be physically present." Ms. Willis looked up sharply, as if suddenly remembering who she was speaking to. Her expression hardened. "Yes, well, that's hardly your concern, is it? Please finish quickly, and don't forget to report that shower issue." The wall between them reasserted itself, and Brenda returned to her cleaning, the brief human connection severed. Yet as she worked, she found herself thinking about Ms. Willis differently. Behind the demanding exterior was a mother who, despite all her advantages, struggled with the same fundamental question Brenda often asked herself. Am I doing right by my child? When Brenda finished and prepared to leave, Ms. Willis was on mid-E, the phone her back turned. She didn't acknowledge Brenda's departure, the invisibility restored. But as Brenda pulled the door closed, she heard Ms. Willis say into the phone, "Yes, I know the competition is important, sweetheart, but maybe I could fly out a day early. We could spend some time together before it starts." In that moment, Brenda understood something profound about wealth and its limitations. All the money in the world couldn't guarantee the kind of connection she shared with Dora. Their tiny apartment might lack luxury, but it was filled with conversations, shared dreams, and mutual respect. As she pushed her cart toward the next room, Brenda's phone vibrated in her pocket, a luxury she allowed herself for emergency contact with Dora. The text message was brief. "Got news about the internship application. Tell you tonight, love you." Brenda smiled, her step lightening despite her fatigue. Good news or bad, they would face it together. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to consider David Marshall's offer, not just for the better pay, but for the chance to be seen, truly seen, as more than just a function, more than just the cleaning lady. The day stretched ahead, full of mundane tasks and invisible labor, but for the first time in years, Brenda felt something new unfurling within. Her the possibility of change. Will Brenda find the courage to step into a new chapter of her life, or will past disappointments keep her trapped in familiar patterns? Will Ms. Willis's brief moment of humanity develop into something more meaningful? And what news awaits about Dora's internship that could change everything for the Wilson family? That evening, Brenda arrived home later than usual, her body aching from an especially demanding day. Ms. Willis had requested additional services, and the hotel manager had insisted Brenda stay beyond her shift to accommodate the valued guest. As she climbed the stairs to their apartment, each step felt heavier than the last. But when she opened the door and saw Dora's face, all fatigue momentarily vanished. Her daughter was practically vibrating with excitement, pacing the small living room with a paper clutched in her hand. "Mom, finally, I've been waiting for hours," Dora exclaimed, rushing to embrace Brenda. "Sorry, sweetie, Ms. Willis had special requirements today," Brenda explained, setting down her bag. "What's the big news?" Dora thrust the paper toward her mother. They waived the application fee for the internship. Mr. Peterson submitted a special recommendation letter explaining my financial situation, and the museum has a diversity initiative that includes socioeconomic considerations and—" She paused to take a breath. "I can apply. And Mr. Peterson thinks I have a real chance." Relief and joy flooded through Brenda. She pulled Dora into another tight hug, blinking back unexpected tears. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." "There's more," Dora continued, her words tumbling out rapidly. "If I get the internship, it includes a $3,000 stipend. Can you believe it? I could help with rent, maybe even start saving for college." Brenda gently guided her daughter to sit on their worn couch. "Slow down," she said with a smile. "First, let's focus on the application. When is it due?" 2 weeks from Friday, Dora replied. "I've already started drafting my essay. It's about how astronomy connects us to something greater than ourselves, how understanding the stars gives us perspective on our own lives." Her eyes shone with passion. "Mr. Peterson says it's a unique angle." As Dora continued explaining her ideas, Brenda was struck by the contrast between this moment and her experience at the jewelry store the previous day. Here, in their modest apartment, was genuine wealth, the wealth of intellect, of dreams, of love. No diamond could shine brighter than her daughter's eyes right now. "I'll continue writing the story from where it left off. I'm going to work on my essay some more," Dora announced, heading to their small kitchen table that doubled as her desk. "Mr. Peterson said he'd review a draft tomorrow during lunch period." Brenda smiled, watching her daughter gather her notebooks. "I'll make us something to eat. You need brain food." As Brenda prepared a simple pasta dinner, her mind returned to David Marshall's business card, still tucked in her purse. With the application fee no longer a concern, the pendant would be Dora's only birthday gift. But now, it represented pure celebration rather than a financial sacrifice. And perhaps David's job offer represented something similar, not a desperate necessity, but an opportunity for growth. After dinner, while Dora was absorbed in her essay, Brenda quietly stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. She took out David's card, staring at it for a long moment before dialing the number. "Garrison's Fine Jewelry," a polite voice answered. "May I speak with David Marshall, please?" Brenda requested, her heart racing. "I'm sorry, Mr. Marshall has left for the day. May I take a message?" Brenda hesitated. "This is Brenda Wilson. I met with him yesterday about a job opportunity." "Oh, Ms. Wilson." The voice warmed instantly. "Mr. Marshall mentioned you might call. He asked me to set up an interview if you did. Would tomorrow morning at 9:30 work for you?" Surprised by this confirmation that the offer had been genuine, Brenda quickly mentally rearranged her schedule. She would miss her morning shift at the hotel, losing those hours of pay, but something told her this risk was necessary. "Yes, 9:30 works perfectly," she confirmed. After hanging up, Brenda leaned against the bathroom sink, studying her reflection. The woman who looked back at her seemed different somehow, still tired, still worn, but with a spark of something new in her eyes, hope perhaps, or courage. The following morning, Brenda stood outside Garrison's Fine Jewelry 15 minutes early for her interview. She had worn her best outfit, a navy blue skirt suit she had purchased second-hand for Dora's parent-teacher conferences. Her hair was neatly styled, and she had applied a touch of mascara and lipstick, small efforts to feel more confident. Through the window, she could see Eleanor assisting a customer, and for a moment, Brenda's resolve faltered. Would she always be seen as the cleaning lady who didn't belong? Would customers like Elena's current client look at her with the same dismissive glance? Before she could reconsider, David appeared at the door, smiling as he held it open for her. "Ms. Wilson, right on time. Please come in." As they walked through the showroom, Brenda was acutely aware of Elena watching them, her expression a mixture of confusion and wariness. Other staff members glanced up with curious looks. David led her to his office, where a young woman was waiting with a tablet in hand. "Ms. Wilson, this is Hannah, our operations manager. She'll be joining us for the interview." Hannah, perhaps in her early 30s, extended her hand with a warm smile. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Marshall has spoken highly of your work ethic. The interview began conventionally enough, with questions about Brenda's employment, history and availability. She explained her current jobs, her schedule limitations due to Dora's needs, and her lack of retail experience. Throughout, she maintained eye contact and spoke with the quiet dignity that had sustained her through years of challenging circumstances. "Tell me, Ms. Wilson," Hannah said, consulting her tablet, "what skills do you think you bring that would benefit Garrisons?" Brenda considered the question carefully. "Reliability," she finally said. "In 16 years of cleaning work, I've never missed a shift without arranging coverage. I understand the importance of details. A speck of dust in a luxury hotel room can lead to a complaint, just as a smudge on a diamond can diminish its appeal." David nodded approvingly. "And how would you handle a difficult customer? Someone who might be less than courteous?" The question brought Elena's condescending smile to mind, but Brenda didn't mention the incident. "Everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they behave. I've learned to maintain my professionalism, even when others don't extend the same courtesy." The interview continued for nearly an hour, with increasingly specific questions about inventory management, basic computer skills, and customer service scenarios. By the end, Brenda felt mentally exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "Well, Ms. Wilson," David said, closing his folder, "Hannah and I need to discuss a few things. Would you mind waiting in the break room for a few minutes? Marcus can show you the way." The break room was small but comfortable, with a coffee machine, refrigerator, and small table. On the wall hung photographs of staff gatherings, holiday, parties, birthdays, what appeared to be a company picnic. Brenda studied these images, noting the genuine smiles, the sense of community they conveyed. She was so absorbed in the photographs that she didn't immediately notice Eleanor entering the room. "So," Eleanor said, her voice cool as she poured herself coffee, "you're interviewing for a position here." Brenda straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I am." Eleanor stirred her coffee slowly, not making eye contact. "You know, I've worked here for 8 years. Started as a sales associate, worked my way up to lead sales consultant." "That's impressive," Brenda replied, unsure where the conversation was heading. "It hasn't been easy," Elena continued. "This industry, it's about appearances, about connections, about fitting in with the kind of people who spend thousands on jewelry without thinking twice." She finally looked directly at Brenda. "People expect a certain kind of image when they shop at a place like Garrisons." The implication was clear, but before Brenda could respond, David appeared at the doorway. "Ms. Wilson, we're ready for you." Back in David's office, Hannah and David exchanged a look before David spoke. "We'd like to offer you the position, Ms. Wilson. Part-time, 20 hours per week, with a starting wage of $24 per hour. The schedule would be flexible, but we'd need you consistently on Saturdays, our busiest day." The salary was nearly double what she earned cleaning for fewer hours. Brenda felt a wave of emotion that she carefully contained. The position would primarily involve inventory management, receiving new pieces, updating our digital system, assisting with monthly audits, Hannah explained. "But you'd also help with customer service during busy periods, gift wrapping, and other administrative tasks as needed. There would be a 4-week training period," David added, "during which you'd learn our systems and procedures. Hannah would be your direct supervisor." It seemed too good to be true. "May I ask why me?" "You must have had other applicants with retail experience." David and Hannah exchanged another look before David answered. "Experience can be taught, Ms. Wilson. Character cannot. Your dedication to your daughter, your work ethic, those qualities align with the values my father built this business on." Brenda took a deep breath. "I accept the position. Thank you for this opportunity." As they discussed start dates and paperwork, Brenda felt as if she were watching herself from a distance. The cleaning lady who had entered this store in Humiliation 2 days ago was now being offered a new beginning within its walls. When she left Garrisons an hour later, employment forms in her bag and a start date set for the following Monday, Brenda stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the clear blue sky. The world looked different somehow, as if possibilities long, Dormant were suddenly visible on the horizon. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone saw potential in you that you couldn't see in yourself? Or do you know someone who had their life changed by an unexpected opportunity? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Telling Dora about the new job was one of the most joyful moments Brenda had experienced in years. Her daughter's initial disbelief quickly transformed into excitement as she bombarded Brenda with questions. What would she be doing? Would she get to wear the beautiful jewelry? Did this mean they could finally get internet at home for Dora's research? Slow down, Brenda laughed, overwhelmed by Dora's enthusiasm. Let's take this one step at a time. First, I need to learn the job. Then we'll see about improvements to our situation. The reality of this transition became clear over the next few days as Brenda rearranged her entire life schedule. She reluctantly gave notice at the hotel, but kept her weekend cleaning job with Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly woman who had become almost a grandmother figure to Dora. The office cleaning job she would maintain temporarily, working evening shifts, 3 days a week until she was certain the position at Garrison's would work out. "You're crazy to keep any cleaning work," Mrs. Garza commented when Brenda explained her schedule. "You'll exhaust yourself." "Just being cautious," Brenda replied. "New beginnings are wonderful, but I need to make sure we're secure." The Monday of her first day at Garrison's arrived with a mixture of excitement and terror. Brenda had spent her last paycheck on 2 new blouses and a pair of dress pants, practical investments for her new role. As she dressed, Dora watched from the doorway of their shared bedroom. "You look different, Mom," she observed. "More confident." Brenda smoothed her blouse nervously. "Do I? I feel like I'm about to walk into a final exam I haven't studied for." "You'll be amazing," Dora assured her, with the absolute conviction that only teenagers can muster. "They chose you for a reason." Arriving at Garrison's, Brenda was greeted by Hannah, who immediately began her orientation. The morning flew by in a blur of information: inventory tracking systems, security protocols, insurance requirements for high-value pieces, vendor relationships. By lunchtime, Brenda's head was spinning, but Hannah seemed pleased with her quick grasp of the concepts. "You have a natural attention to detail," Hannah commented as they ate in the break room. "That's rare and valuable in this business." After lunch, David introduced Brenda to Marcus, the young sales associate who had shown her the pendant on her first visit. Unlike Eleanor, Marcus was warm and welcoming. "I'll teach you the gift wrapping techniques," he offered. "It took me weeks to get them right, but I bet you'll master them in days." The afternoon passed in practical training, with Brenda learning the store's elaborate gift presentation process. Her cleaning work had given her dexterous fingers, and she quickly adapted to the precise folds and ribbon techniques that were Garrison's signature. At the end of the day, as Brenda prepared to leave, David stopped by the wrapping station. "How was your first day?" he asked. "Overwhelming," Brenda admitted honestly, "but in a good way. There's so much to learn." "You're doing well," he assured her. "Hannah is impressed, and she's not easily impressed." As they spoke, Elena approached with a client folder in hand. She hesitated slightly upon seeing Brenda, but maintained her professional demeanor. "Mr. Marshall, the Hendersons have increased their anniversary bracelet budget. They'd like to see additional options in the Sapphire collection." "Excellent," David replied. "Please show them the new pieces that arrived last week." As Elena walked away, he turned back to Brenda. "You'll encounter all types here, clients and colleagues alike. The key is remembering that everyone has their own story, their own struggles that we may not see." Brenda nodded, understanding that he was subtly addressing the tension with Eleanor. "I've learned that lesson cleaning hotel rooms for wealthy guests. The mess people leave behind tells you a lot about what they're carrying inside." David seemed struck by her observation. "That's a profound insight, Ms. Wilson. Perhaps your experiences have prepared you for this position in ways neither of us fully realized." Over the next 2 weeks, Brenda settled into her new role with growing confidence. The inventory system, initially intimidating, began to make sense. She found unexpected satisfaction in the precision required, each piece carefully catalogued, described and tracked. Hannah gave her increasing responsibility, and even David sought her input on the organization of the storeroom. The only shadow was Elena, who maintained a cool, professional distance. Though never openly hostile, she made it clear through subtle words and gestures that she considered Brenda out of place in the refined world of garrisons. On the Thursday before Dora's birthday, Brenda was organizing a new shipment when David approached with an elegantly dressed woman. "Ms. Wilson, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Henderson. She and her husband are long-time clients." Brenda stood quickly, smoothing her slacks. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Henderson." The woman, perhaps in her 60s, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and understated diamond earrings, smiled warmly. "David tells me you're the one who reorganized the vintage collection. He says you have an eye for detail." "I'm still learning," Brenda replied modestly. "Mrs. Henderson is celebrating her 40th wedding anniversary next month," David explained. "She's looking for something unique for the occasion." "May I ask what you have in mind?" Brenda inquired. Mrs. Henderson's expression softened. "Something that captures the journey, the ups and downs, the beauty that comes from weathering life's storms together." Her words resonated with Brenda, who thought for a moment before responding. "Have you considered pieces with natural elements? Perhaps something with raw stones alongside polished ones? The contrast speaks to the journey from rough beginnings to refined beauty." Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up. "That's exactly the symbolism I've been trying to express. David, can you show me pieces like that?" As David led Mrs. Henderson to a display case, he gave Brenda an approving nod. The brief interaction left her with a warm sense of accomplishment. She had connected with a client on a human level, beyond the transaction of selling jewelry. That evening, as Brenda prepared to leave, Hannah handed her a small box. "A gift from the staff to welcome you officially to the team." Inside was a delicate silver pin in the shape of a key. "It's beautiful," Brenda said, touched by the gesture. "The key is Garrison's symbol," Hannah explained. "It represents unlocking the stories behind every piece of jewelry we sell." As Brenda pinned it to her blouse, she noticed Elena watching from across the room. For the briefest moment their eyes met, and Eleanor gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not friendship exactly, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. Walking home in the early evening light, Brenda felt a profound sense of transition. Tomorrow was Dora's birthday, marking not only her daughter's journey into her 16th year, but also Brenda's own journey into a new chapter of their lives. The star pendant, hidden safely at home, now seemed to represent more than just a gift. It symbolized possibility, the possibility that life could change, that new paths could open, that stars might align in ways she had never dared to imagine. Dora's 16th birthday dawned bright and clear, a perfect Saturday in early autumn. Brenda had taken the day off from all her jobs, the first complete day of rest she had allowed herself in years. She woke before Dora and quietly prepared. A special breakfast of cinnamon French toast, her daughter's favorite. The small dining table was transformed with a cheerful tablecloth borrowed from Mrs. Garza, a vase of inexpensive but colorful daisies, and a carefully wrapped package containing the star pendant. When Dora emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she stopped short at the sight. "Mom, you didn't have to do all this." "It's not every day my brilliant daughter turns 16, Brenda replied, pulling Dora into a hug. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." They enjoyed breakfast together, talking about everything and nothing, school projects, Brenda's new job, the upcoming internship application deadline. When they finally finished, Brenda pushed the wrapped package across the table. "This is for you," she said softly. "I've been planning it for a while." Dora carefully unwrapped the gift, her methodical approach a reflection of her scientific mind. When she opened the velvet box and saw the star pendant gleaming against the dark fabric, she gasped. "Mom, it's perfect." Her fingers hovered over the pendant, almost afraid to touch it. "But this must have cost—" "Don't worry about the cost," Brenda interrupted gently. "Just know that when I look at you, I see someone as brilliant and full of possibility as the stars you love studying." Dora's eyes filled with tears as she lifted the pendant from the box. "Will you put it on me?" Brenda fastened the delicate chain around her daughter's neck, the star settling just above her heart. In that moment, watching Dora's face in the mirror as she admired the pendant, Brenda knew that every sacrifice had been worthwhile. The rest of the day unfolded in simple pleasures. A walk through the Boston Common, lunch at a small cafe that was a rare treat for their budget, and a free astronomy presentation at the Museum of Science, a birthday tradition they had maintained since Dora was 8. As they sat in the planetarium watching stars and galaxies swirl across the domed ceiling, Dora clutched her new pendant. "Do you think I'll get the internship, Mom?" she whispered. "I believe in you," Brenda replied. "And, more importantly, you've done the work to deserve it. The rest is up to the universe." Later that evening, they returned home to find Mrs. Garza, the Diaz family, and several of Dora's school friends waiting with a surprise gathering. Someone had brought a cake. Another had strung up twinkling lights that transformed their modest apartment into something magical. As Brenda watched Dora laughing with her friends, the star pendant catching the light with every movement, she felt a rare moment of complete contentment. Despite all their struggles, despite the limitations of their circumstances, they had created a life rich with connection and purpose. Her phone buzzed with a text message. To her surprise, it was from David Marshall. "Hope your daughter's birthday is special. See you Monday." The simple acknowledgement of this important day in her life, a message sent after business hours from the owner of the store to a new employee, spoke volumes about the kind of person David was and the kind of workplace culture he fostered. As the small party continued around her, Brenda found herself wondering about David's story. He had mentioned his father starting the business, but little else about his personal life. The photograph on his desk showed a family, but he wore no wedding ring. There was clearly depth to him that she had only glimpsed. Her musings were interrupted when Mr. Diaz called for everyone's attention. "A toast to Dora," he announced, raising a glass of sparkling cider, "who makes us all believe that the stars are within reach." "To Dora," the group echoed, and Brenda watched her daughter blush with pleasure at being celebrated. After the guests had departed and they were cleaning up the last of the party debris, Dora suddenly embraced Brenda fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for today, but for everything. For working so hard all these years, for believing in me." Brenda held her daughter close, marveling at how the small child who had once needed her for everything was growing into a young woman of remarkable strength and intelligence. "You make it all worthwhile," she replied simply. That night, as Brenda prepared for bed, she realized that something fundamental had shifted within her. The constant anxiety about survival, about making ends meet, about failing Dora. It hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had receded, making space for something new. Hope, perhaps, or faith in possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. Monday would bring a return to Garrison's, to her new role that still felt surreal. But now, instead of fear, she felt anticipation. What would this week bring? What new skills would she develop? What connections would she make? As she drifted toward sleep, Brenda found herself thinking again of David Marshall and his unexpected kindness that had altered the trajectory of her life. There were people in the world, like Ms. Willis at the hotel, whose wealth brought them no apparent joy. And there were others, like David, who seemed to find fulfillment in extending opportunity to those who needed it most. What separated these two types of people? And was it possible that she, Brenda Wilson, cleaning lady turned jewelry store employee, might someday be in a position to offer someone else the kind of lifeline David had extended to her? The questions followed her into dreams filled with stars and open doors, with pathways leading to destinations she had never before imagined possible. What will Monday bring for Brenda at Garrison's? Will Elena's frosty attitude thaw further, or will new challenges arise? And as Dora's internship application deadline approaches, what futures might open for mother and daughter alike? Monday morning arrived with an unexpected complication. Dora woke with a fever and sore throat. Despite her protest that she was fine to go to school, Brenda insisted she stay home. "Mom, you can't miss work at Garrison's," Dora argued, her voice hoarse. "Not when you're still so new there." Brenda wavered, torn between responsibilities. She had already arranged to work later that evening at her office cleaning job, and now this. She thought of calling David to explain, but before she could decide, Mrs. Garza knocked on their door. "I heard coughing," the elderly woman said with concern. "Is everything all right?" Within minutes, a solution presented itself. Mrs. Garza, a retired nurse, offered to look in on Dora throughout the day. "I'm home anyway, giving piano lessons. She can rest, and I'll check on her between students." Grateful beyond words, Brenda prepared a quick breakfast for Dora, gathered her things for work, and headed to Garrison's with only minutes to spare. She arrived slightly breathless, her usual carefully composed appearance a bit disheveled. Hannah noticed immediately. "Everything okay, Brenda?" The use of her first name, a recent shift from the more formal Ms. Wilson, still caught Brenda by surprise. "Dora's sick," she explained. "Nothing serious, but I was arranging care for her. If you need to adjust your hours this week, we can work something out," Hannah offered. "Family comes first here." The simple understanding, so different from the rigid expectations of her cleaning jobs, nearly brought tears to Brenda's eyes. "Thank you. I think we're covered for today, but I appreciate the flexibility." The morning proceeded smoothly, with Brenda cataloguing new pieces that had arrived over the weekend. Around noon, David appeared at her workstation. "Ms. Wilson, I have a special project I'd like your help with," he said. "Are you familiar with estate jewelry?" "Only in general terms," Brenda admitted. "We've acquired a collection from the estate of a prominent Boston family," David explained. "Many pieces date back to the early 1900s. I'd like you to help me inventory and research them." Brenda followed him to a private room at the back of the store, where several leather cases lay open on a table. Inside were pieces unlike any she had seen in the regular inventory, ornate vintage designs with history embedded in every facet. "These are extraordinary," she breathed, carefully examining a delicate Art Nouveau pendant. "They are," David agreed. "And they each have a story. That's what I'd like to capture in our inventory, not just the technical specifications, but the human narrative behind them." For the next several hours, they worked side by side, David sharing his extensive knowledge of historical jewelry styles while Brenda carefully documented each piece. It was meticulous work that required complete focus, and Brenda found herself fully absorbed, momentarily forgetting her concerns about Dora. "You have an instinct for this," David commented, as Brenda correctly identified the period of a particular bracelet based on its craftsmanship. "Most people take years to develop that eye." "I've always noticed details," Brenda replied. "When you clean for a living, you learn to see what others miss." David regarded her thoughtfully. "So your previous work gave you skills that are surprisingly transferable. The question is, where might those skills take you next?" Before Brenda could respond, her phone vibrated. It was a text from Mrs. Garza. "Dora's fever is up. Doctor says she should be seen." Anxiety flooded back instantly. "I'm sorry, I need to go," she said, showing David the message. "My daughter—" "Of course," he interrupted. "Family emergency. Do you need a ride? It would be faster than public transportation." 20 minutes later, Brenda found herself in the passenger seat of David's luxury sedan as he navigated Boston traffic with calm efficiency. The situation, her new employer driving her to pick up her sick child, was so far outside her normal experience that it felt almost dreamlike. "Thank you for this," she said, breaking the silence. "It's above and beyond." David glanced at her, briefly before returning his attention to the road. "My father raised me to believe that business is about people, not just profit. The jewelry we sell marks the most significant moments in people's lives, engagements, births, anniversaries. If we don't understand the human element, we're just selling expensive rocks." There was something in his tone, a hint of personal experience behind the philosophy, that made Brenda curious. "Your father sounds like a wise man. Is he still involved in the business?" A shadow crossed David's face. "He passed away 5 years ago, heart attack, very sudden." He paused. "My mother died when I was in college, so it's just been me since then." "I'm sorry," Brenda said, recognizing the familiar contours of loss in his voice. "The store keeps his memory alive," David continued. "Every decision I make, I ask myself what he would have done. He smiled slightly. Hiring you, for instance. He would have approved. They arrived at Brenda's apartment building, and David insisted on waiting to drive them to the doctor's office. As Brenda hurried upstairs, she was struck by the strangeness of her current situation, her wealthy employer waiting outside her rundown building, ready to help in a family crisis. Inside, she found Dora pale and miserable on the couch, with Mrs. Garza applying a cool cloth to her forehead. The fever's at 102, Mrs. Garza reported, and she complained of pain when swallowing. Could be strep throat. There's a car waiting, Brenda explained as she helped Dora to her feet. My boss is giving us a ride to the doctor. Dora's eyes widened despite her illness. Your boss? The jewelry store owner? In the car, David was the perfect gentleman, helping Dora into the back seat and making conversation that distracted her from her discomfort. He drove them to a nearby urgent care center and, to Brenda's surprise, waited in the reception area while they saw the doctor. The diagnosis was indeed strep throat. As they left with a prescription for antibiotics, Brenda found David on the phone, apparently rearranging his afternoon appointments. The pharmacy's just down the street, he said, pocketing his phone. We'll get the prescription filled, then I'll take you both home. Mr. Marshall, you've already done so much, Brenda began. David, please, he corrected, and it's no trouble. By the time they returned to the apartment, Dora had taken her first dose of antibiotics and was drowsy from the medication. David helped her to the door but didn't enter, sensing Brenda's discomfort at having him see their modest living conditions. Thank you, Brenda said again, standing in the doorway. For everything. Take tomorrow off if she needs you, David replied. Just let Hannah know. As his car pulled away, Brenda felt a complex mixture of emotions, gratitude for his kindness, embarrassment at needing help, and something else she wasn't quite ready to acknowledge, a growing personal interest in the man who had seen her value when others had not. Inside, she found Dora already asleep on the couch. Mrs. Garza had left a pot of soup on the stove with a note, "For both of you, rest well." As Brenda gently covered Dora with a blanket, she noticed her daughter was still wearing the star pendant, even in illness. It caught the afternoon light, sending tiny reflections across the worn walls of their apartment. The contrast between their home and the world of Garrison's had never seemed so stark, yet somehow the boundaries between these separate spheres of Brenda's life were beginning to blur. David had crossed from one world into the other today, bringing with him a kind of respect and dignity that Brenda had rarely experienced in her years of service work. Later, as she called her evening cleaning job to explain her absence, Brenda found herself making a decision. Actually, she told her supervisor, I think it's time for me to give my notice. 2 weeks should be sufficient. The words came easily, without the fear that had kept her tethered to multiple exhausting jobs for so long. Something was shifting. In her circumstances, yes, but more fundamentally in her perception of what was possible for her life. As she sat beside her sleeping daughter, Brenda allowed herself to imagine a future different from the one she had resigned herself to. A future with one fulfilling job instead of 3 depleting ones, with evenings free to help Dora with college applications, with the possibility of advancement based on her intelligence and work ethic rather than simply surviving day to day, and perhaps, just perhaps, a future that included connections with people who saw her completely, not as the cleaning lady or even as the inventory manager, but as Brenda Wilson, a woman of value in her own right. Over the next 2 weeks, Brenda's life settled into a new rhythm. Dora recovered quickly from her illness and threw herself into finalizing her internship application. Meanwhile, Brenda gave notice at her remaining cleaning job, focusing entirely on her role at Garrison's, where her responsibilities continued to expand. The estate collection she had helped David catalog was now featured in a special display, with small cards sharing the historical context and stories Brenda had helped document. Customers responded enthusiastically to this personal approach, and sales from the collection exceeded expectations. Your idea to include the human stories behind the pieces was brilliant, Hannah told her one afternoon. It's changed how we're thinking about marketing our vintage inventory. It wasn't really my idea, Brenda demurred. David, Mr. Marshall, suggested it. But you ran with it, Hannah countered. Don't minimize your contributions, Brenda. You bring a fresh perspective that this place needed. These small affirmations built gradually, like sedimentary layers forming a new foundation beneath Brenda's feet. Each acknowledgement of her value, each instance where her opinion was sought and respected, reinforced her growing confidence. Even Elena's attitude had shifted from cool dismissal to grudging acceptance. One Friday afternoon, as they worked, together preparing for a busy weekend, Elena stopped abruptly in the middle of explaining a display arrangement. "You know, I didn't think you'd last a month," she admitted bluntly. Brenda met her gaze steadily. "I gathered that." "I was wrong," Elena continued, the words clearly difficult for her. "You're good at this. Not the sales part maybe, but the organization, the attention to detail, the way you remember client preferences. That's valuable." Coming from Elena, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you," Brenda said simply. "That means a lot." Elena seemed about to say more, but instead returned to her explanation of the display. The moment passed, but something had changed in their dynamic. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual professional respect that made the workplace more comfortable for them both. David had been away at a jewelry conference for several days, but he had called twice to check on specific inventory questions and to ask how Brenda was settling in. These conversations were strictly professional, yet Brenda found herself looking forward to his return with an anticipation that surprised her. The Friday before he was due back, Brenda was working late, finalizing a monthly inventory report. The store had closed and only she and Hannah remained, each focused on end-of-week tasks. When Brenda's phone rang, she was startled to see Dora's number. "Mom!" Her daughter's voice crackled with excitement. "I got it! I got the internship!" The world seemed to pause as the significance of the news registered. "Oh, Dora, that's wonderful. Mr. Peterson just called me. He heard directly from the museum director. They were so impressed with my essay and recommendations that they're offering me a position in the astrophysics division, not just the general science program." Tears sprang to Brenda's eyes as the magnitude of this opportunity became clear. This wasn't just a summer activity. It was a stepping stone toward Dora's dreams, a credential that would strengthen her college applications, a validation of her innate brilliance. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Brenda said, her voice thick with emotion. "So incredibly proud." When she ended the call, Brenda found Hannah watching her with a smile. "Good news?" "My daughter just got accepted to a prestigious internship at the Museum of Science," Brenda explained, unable to contain her pride. "She's 16 and will be working in the astrophysics division." "That's incredible," Hannah said warmly. "You must have raised her well." "I did my best," Brenda replied. "Often it didn't feel like enough, but somehow she's thrived anyway." "That's a tribute to you as much as to her," Hannah observed. "Children don't succeed in a vacuum. They need support, stability, someone who believes in them unconditionally." She paused. "David mentioned you're raising her alone. That can't have been easy." The casual reference to a personal conversation about her family caught Brenda off guard. "He discussed my personal situation?" Hannah seemed to realize her misstep. "Only in the context of how impressed he was with your work ethic, juggling multiple jobs while supporting your daughter." She hesitated. "David notices people, their struggles and strengths. It's what makes him different from many business owners I've worked for." Brenda nodded, processing this information. "He's been very kind to me." "It's more than kindness," Hannah said carefully. "It's recognition of capability." She gathered her papers, preparing to leave. "By the way, he's returning tomorrow and mentioned wanting to discuss something with you. Said it was important but wouldn't elaborate." That night, as Brenda and Dora celebrated the internship news with a rare splurge on takeout pizza, Brenda found her thoughts returning to Hannah's words. What could David want to discuss that was so important? Was it related to her performance? Had she made some mistake she wasn't aware of? "Mum, you're a million miles away," Dora observed, waving a pizza slice in front of Brenda's face. "What's up?" Brenda refocused on the moment, this precious celebration of her daughter's achievement. "Just thinking about how much is changing for both of us," she said honestly. "It's a lot to process." Good changes, though, Dora pointed out. For once. Yes, Brenda agreed, smiling. Very good changes. Saturday morning found Brenda at Garrison's earlier than usual, a nervousness in her stomach that she couldn't quite explain. The store was busy from the moment they opened, with several clients coming in specifically to see pieces from the estate collection she had helped document. It was nearly noon when David arrived, looking fresh and energized despite his travels. He greeted the staff warmly, took a moment to compliment Elena on a significant sale she had made, and then approached Brenda. "Ms. Wilson," he said formally, aware of clients nearby, "could I see you in my office when you have a moment?" Brenda nodded, trying to read his expression for clues about the important matter Hannah had mentioned. His face gave nothing away. 20 minutes later, after assisting a client with a gift purchase, Brenda knocked on David's office door. "Come in," he called, and she entered to find him reviewing the inventory report she had completed the previous evening. He looked up with a smile. "This report is excellent. You've established a new standard for our documentation." "Thank you," Brenda replied, still standing uncertainly near the door. "Please sit," David said, gesturing to the chair opposite, his desk. "Hannah mentioned your daughter received some good news yesterday." The personal reference surprised her. "Yes, she did. Dora was accepted to a summer internship at the Museum of Science, in the Astrophysics Division." "That's remarkable," David said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "She must be an exceptional young woman." "She is," Brenda agreed. "Much smarter than I ever was." "I doubt that," David countered. "Intelligence takes many forms. Your ability to analyze systems, improve processes, connect with people, those are significant forms of intelligence." His compliment warmed her, but also increased her curiosity about this meeting. "Hannah mentioned you wanted to discuss something important." "Yes," David confirmed, his manner becoming more businesslike. "I've been reviewing our staffing structure while at the conference, considering areas where we need additional support." He paused. "Brenda, I'd like to offer you a full-time position as our operations coordinator." The words hung in the air as Brenda processed their meaning. Full-time, 40 hours per week with benefits, health insurance, paid vacation, retirement contribution. The salary would be $52,000 annually to start, with a review after 6 months. The figure was more than double her current combined income from all her jobs. Health insurance alone would transform their lives, eliminating the constant anxiety about illness or injury that haunted those without coverage. "The role would be an expansion of what you're already doing," David continued. "Inventory management, vendor coordination, systems improvement, plus supervising our support staff. You'd report directly to Hannah." Brenda's mind raced, calculating what this would mean. A single job with regular hours, no more physical exhaustion from cleaning, financial stability, the ability to be more present for Dora during her critical high school years. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "Say yes," David replied simply. "You've earned this opportunity through your work here. It's not charity or favoritism, it's recognition of the value you bring to Garrison's." Brenda looked at him directly, searching his face for any hint of ulterior motive or condescension. She found only sincerity and professional respect. "Yes," she said firmly, "I accept." David's smile broadened. "Excellent. Hannah will prepare the formal offer letter with all the details. You can start the new position as soon as you're ready." As they discussed the transition, Brenda felt a surreal quality to the conversation. Just weeks ago, she had been humiliated, in this very store, treated as someone who didn't belong in this world of luxury and beauty. Now she was being offered a position of responsibility, with compensation that would fundamentally change her and Dora's quality of life. When the meeting concluded and Brenda returned to the showroom floor, she moved with a new awareness of herself, not as someone tentatively occupying borrowed space, but as a person who had earned her place through genuine contribution. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and colleagues, but beneath the routine activities, Brenda felt the seismic shift in her circumstances, setting off aftershocks of possibility. What else might be within her reach that she had never dared to consider? The following weeks brought a whirlwind of changes for both Brenda and Dora. With her new salary and regular hours, Brenda was able to make improvements to their lives. That had previously seemed impossible. Reliable internet service for Dora's research, a small used laptop to replace the ancient desktop computer they had been sharing, even the luxury of occasional taxis home when working late rather than waiting for unreliable night buses. The most significant change, however, was more subtle. Lifting of the constant stress that had been their companion for so long. Brenda no longer woke in the night, calculating bills against income, no longer chose between necessary purchases, no longer feared that one unexpected expense would collapse their precarious financial equilibrium. At Garrison's, Brenda settled into her new role with growing confidence. Hannah proved to be an excellent mentor, sharing her knowledge freely while encouraging Brenda to develop her own leadership style. Even Elena had fully accepted Brenda's new position, occasionally seeking her input on inventory questions. David maintained a professional relationship with Brenda, treating her with the same respectful collegiality he showed other managers. Yet there were moments, a shared smile over a customer interaction, a thoughtful question about Dora's internship, that suggested a personal interest beyond their work connection. As summer approached, Dora prepared for her internship with focused excitement. Her room gradually transformed into a miniature lab, with astronomy charts covering the walls and textbooks stacked beside her bed. She spent hours researching the scientists she would be working with, determined to make the most of the opportunity. The weekend before Dora's internship began, Brenda surprised her with an unexpected announcement at breakfast. "I've been thinking," she began carefully, "about our living situation." Dora looked up from her cereal, immediately alert. "What about it?" "With my new position, we have more options now." Brenda took a deep breath. "I've been looking at apartments in Cambridge, closer to the museum, 2-bedroom units in safer neighborhoods with better access to public transportation." Dora's spoon clattered against her bowl. "Are you serious? We could move." "It would be a significant change," Brenda cautioned. "Higher rent, new neighborhood, but I think it would be worth it, especially with your internship and college applications coming up next year." "Could we really afford it?" Dora asked, her practical nature asserting itself despite her obvious excitement. "With careful budgeting, yes," Brenda confirmed. "I've done the math." Dora launched herself across the table to hug her mother, nearly knocking over both their breakfast bowls. "This is incredible. When can we start looking?" They spent that day visiting apartments, marveling at spaces with functioning appliances, adequate closets, and windows that actually sealed properly against winter cold. By evening, they had found a modest but clean 2-bedroom unit in a well-maintained building, just a 15-minute bus ride from the museum. "It's perfect," Dora declared as they submitted the application. "I can't believe this is really happening." The apartment manager, reviewing Brenda's employment verification from Garrison's and her newly improved credit score, approved them on the spot. "You can move in next weekend if you'd like," she offered. "The unit's ready now." As they walked home, planning their move, Brenda was struck by how drastically their lives had changed in just a few months. From the humiliation she had felt in Garrison's that first day to now, a respected manager, able to provide a better home for her daughter, the transformation seemed almost too profound to be real. "Mom," Dora said suddenly, interrupting Brenda's thoughts. "I've been wondering about something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Mr. Marshall, the jewelry store owner who helped you. Do you like him? Like really like him?" The unexpected question caught Brenda completely off guard. "What? Why would you ask that?" Dora rolled her eyes in typical teenage fashion. "Because you get this specific expression whenever you talk about him, or the store calls. And you've mentioned him like 100 times in the past few weeks." "That's an exaggeration," Brenda protested, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "And he's my employer, nothing more." Dora hummed skeptically. "If you say so." The question lingered with Brenda long after they returned home. Did she have feelings for David, beyond professional respect and gratitude? She had been so focused on survival for so long that romance had seemed an unaffordable luxury. The men she encountered in her cleaning jobs were either indifferent to her existence or occasionally inappropriately familiar. Dating had been impossible with her schedule and financial constraints. David was different, kind without being condescending, professional without being distant, but he was also her boss, from a different world entirely. The practical barriers seemed insurmountable, regardless of any attraction she might feel. The moving process provided a welcome distraction from these unsettling thoughts. Their years in the old apartment had accumulated more possessions than Brenda realized, despite their limited means. Sorting through these items became an archaeological excavation of their lives together. Dora's elementary school art projects, outgrown clothes, books read and reread until their spines cracked. On moving day, Brenda was overwhelmed by the support that materialized. Mrs. Garza orchestrated a team of neighbors to help pack and carry. The Diaz family provided their minivan for transporting boxes. Even Mr. Feldman from the first floor appeared, with his toolbox, offering to help reassemble furniture at the new apartment. By evening, they were settled enough to enjoy a pizza dinner sitting on packing boxes in their new living room. Their neighbors had returned to the old building, leaving mother and daughter alone in their new space. "It feels weird," Dora admitted, looking around. "Good weird, but still weird." "I know what you mean," Brenda agreed. "Like we're visitors in someone else's life." "Do you think we'll ever feel like we deserve this?" Dora asked quietly. "Like we belong in a nice place with enough money for what we need?" The question pierced Brenda's heart with its raw honesty. "I hope so," she replied. "I think that's part of our journey now, learning to believe we deserve good things." Later, as Brenda unpacked kitchen items, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello? Brenda? It's David Marshall." His voice sounded different outside the context of the store, less formal, more personal. "David," she responded, surprised. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "Hannah mentioned you were moving this weekend, and I just wanted to check if you needed anything." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. "That's very kind, but we're managing, just surrounded by boxes at the moment." "I remember that feeling," David said with a chuckle. "When I moved after my father passed, I found boxes I hadn't unpacked from my previous move 5 years earlier." The personal anecdote created a momentary connection that transcended their professional relationship. "I'm discovering we have more possessions than I realized, despite living in a small space," Brenda admitted. "It's surprising how much life we managed to fit into that apartment." "Life has a way of expanding to fill whatever space we give it," David observed. There was a brief pause before he continued. "Brenda, I was wondering if you and your daughter might like to join me for dinner next weekend to celebrate your move and her internship. Nothing formal. There's a great Italian restaurant near your new neighborhood." The invitation hung in the air, its implications unclear. Was this a friendly gesture from an employer or something more personal? "That sounds lovely," Brenda found herself saying before she could overthink the question. "I'm sure Dora would enjoy it." "Excellent," David replied, a note of pleasure in his voice. "I'll make a reservation for Saturday at 7, if that works for you both." After they hung up, Brenda stood motionless among the half-unpacked boxes, Dora's earlier question echoing in her mind. Did she like David? The flutter in her stomach at the thought of Saturday's dinner suggested an answer she wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. From across the apartment, Dora called, "Mom, who was that on the phone? You have a weird look on your face." "Just work," Brenda called back, resuming her unpacking with renewed energy. "Nothing important." But as she arranged dishes in their new kitchen cabinets, Brenda couldn't help but wonder if perhaps something important was beginning. Not just a new chapter in their living situation, but a new chapter in her understanding of what she might deserve from life. Brenda spent the rest of that day with a quiet intensity, a blend of anticipation and self-reflection. As dusk fell over her new apartment, she sat on the sagging sofa amid half-unpacked boxes and took a deep breath. The phone call with David had left her with more questions than answers about her own heart. Was she really beginning to feel something for him beyond gratitude and professional respect? And if so, could she allow herself to be vulnerable in a world that had always demanded resilience and survival? In the stillness of the evening, Brenda picked up her journal. a battered notebook she'd kept for years but rarely written in since life had grown too hectic. With deliberate care, she scribbled down her thoughts. She wrote about the long, grueling nights scrubbing hotel floors, the sacrifices made for Dora, and the countless times she had tucked away hope with each hard-earned penny. Now, however, that hope was starting to kindle something new, the possibility of belonging and, perhaps, love. The next day, as Brenda prepared for the dinner invitation on Saturday, she tried to immerse herself in the ordinary rhythms of her new role at Garrison's. Yet every conversation, every friendly nod from colleagues, reminded her that she was no longer invisible. During a morning meeting, Hannah congratulated her on the improvements she'd introduced to the inventory system, a system that now told the unique stories behind each vintage piece. Even Eleanor, who once regarded her with condescension, now asked for Brenda's input on display arrangements. Every interaction built up her self-worth and made the prospect of Saturday's dinner feel both exciting and inevitable. Saturday afternoon arrived with a brisk autumn chill, and Brenda found herself looking out the window of her new apartment as she watched people hurrying along the street. Dora, energized despite the remnants of her recent illness, had already finished her homework and was busy sketching celestial maps on scrap paper, a passion that matched her internship excitement. Brenda's heart swelled with pride and a touch of nervousness at the thought of tonight's dinner at the Italian restaurant David had recommended. Before leaving home, Brenda checked her appearance in the mirror. Gone were the days of stained uniforms and tired eyes. Today she wore a navy blouse and a neatly pressed skirt. Her hair, pulled back into a low bun, framed her face softly. She took one final look at the star pendant resting on a dresser, the same pendant she had once saved so dearly to buy for Dora, and smiled. It was a reminder of how far both she and her daughter had come. At the restaurant, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, with soft Italian music playing in the background and the gentle hum of conversation. David greeted them at the entrance with an easy smile and a firm handshake that conveyed both respect and a personal warmth that made Brenda's heart flutter. He led them to a private table by a window, where the late afternoon light turned the tablecloth a golden hue. As they settled in, conversation flowed naturally. David asked about Dora's upcoming internship, and Brenda shared details of Dora's relentless dedication to her studies. David listened intently, his eyes reflecting genuine admiration for the young scientist's drive. When he inquired about Brenda's recent transition from cleaning jobs to a managerial role at Garrison's, she spoke with a calm assurance that surprised even herself. The room seemed to grow a bit brighter with every word, and David's subtle smiles hinted at unspoken understanding. Over plates of handmade pasta and fresh salad, David shared stories of his own childhood, the struggles his father had faced, the long hours he'd put in to build the family business, and the moments when kindness had altered his path. Brenda listened, finding comfort in his honesty. His words resonated with her own journey, where hard work had always been both a burden and a badge of honor. At one point during dinner, David paused and looked at Brenda with an intensity that softened his usually composed demeanor. "Brenda," he said quietly, "life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. I see in you not just an employee, but a person of remarkable strength and integrity. I want you to know that my invitation tonight isn't just about celebrating your new start. It's about recognizing the journey you've been on and the future you deserve." Brenda felt a lump rise in her throat as she met his gaze. It was the kind of moment that transcended the professional boundaries that had defined their relationship until now. "Thank you, David," she replied, her voice trembling slightly, with emotion. "I never imagined that someone like me could be seen in this light, but tonight I feel that perhaps I can be more than what I was told I'd always be." Dora, sitting beside Brenda, listened quietly with wide eyes. She had always known her mother was extraordinary, but witnessing this moment, the way the two of them connected over shared stories and mutual respect, filled her with hope for both their futures. The conversation drifted from personal aspirations to light-hearted anecdotes about childhood mishaps, and for a while the boundaries between employer and employee, mentor and friend, seemed to blur into genuine human connection. After dessert, a rich tiramisu that left them both laughing at its overly sweet richness. David excused himself briefly to take a phone call. Brenda and Dora sat together, basking in the warm glow of the evening. Dora leaned over and whispered, "Mom, do you think things will really change? Do you think you'll be happy?" Brenda reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "I do, sweetheart. Sometimes change is scary, but it also brings new beginnings. I'm starting to believe that I deserve to be happy and that our lives can be full of hope and love." When David returned, the final course of the evening was served, a perfectly brewed espresso that David insisted on sharing with them. As they stood to leave, he escorted them to the door, and for a moment, the world outside the restaurant seemed filled with possibility. On the ride home, Brenda sat quietly in the back seat, absorbing the night's events. Dora chatted excitedly about the future, already dreaming of the adventures her internship might bring. Brenda's thoughts, however, wandered back to David's sincere eyes and the feeling that this evening had shifted something deep within her. Maybe, just maybe, she was on the cusp of not only a professional transformation, but a personal rebirth as well. That night, once home, Brenda placed the evening's memories alongside the star pendant on her bedside table. She realized that the pendant, once a symbol of sacrifice, now gleamed as a beacon of hope and new beginnings. In the soft light of her modest room, Brenda allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness, of a life where she was not defined by hardship, but by the love and strength she had always carried inside. As she drifted off to sleep, Brenda's mind danced with visions of a future filled with laughter, stability, and perhaps even love. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while she felt that every step forward was a step toward a life that truly belonged to her. And in that quiet, transformative moment, Brenda knew that the stars, both above and within her, had finally aligned. Congratulations, type 9 in the comments, so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.